welcome everyone. As you have heard from the first speaker, today's theme is on the third eye. Last week we had finished our circle of study with the idea that in this round, when HP came on the scene in the 19th century, her purpose was that humanity moved towards its spiritual center, which is expressed with the higher mind in conjunction with Buddhi. To bring this to the forefront, this diagram on page 300 of the Secret Doctrine is useful. I can put it here so no one else can have access to it. Let us then set the stage before we go with the talk. We are in the fourth round. We are the fifth sub-race of the fifth root race. And if you look on that diagram, on the left-hand side, it shows downward cycle, which means that from the first race to the second and the third, so forth, we're becoming immersed in material life and we're coming downward. In other words, the spirit is becoming immersed into substance. But we have now circled round and we're going upward towards the sixth sub-race, which is coeval with the first race. As you can see, we're on the upper, and we are at the 5.5 of that, because the middle point of this round has been reached for us. And she tells us in the Secret Doctrine that the physical body has been perfected and rounded, and now we're going to be able to express our spirituality as we advance in the coming centuries. So if you read, it is re-evolution or reversion to spirituality and the gradual decrease of materiality and mere brain intellectuality. Up to this point, this is what we have, most of us, I should say, is what we have been using, is the intellectual mind. So her purpose was then to come amongst us and express the higher aspect of the manasa, because the reincarnating ego is pure manasa. And she tells us to think as to who we are and to whom we owe the principles. The Diane Chohans of the Secret Doctrine, I forgot it? Yes, I did. Well, which way is this supposed to go? This way? Okay. So, we are pure manasa. The reincarnating ego is pure manasa. However, she tells us in the Secret Doctrine, its expression without being immersed into substance will only be achieved during the fifth round. So, remembering that, we then go to see how we are to become Buddhi manasic beings. And for that, we need to study the third eye and see what its function is. Remembering that our spiritual nature comes from the Dhyan Chohanic host, which are the archangels of the Christian religion, whether they equate them correctly or not, that is what they are called. And our mind principle was awakened by the Kumaras of the constellation Capricorn. So we owe our principles to divine beings, not human beings, divine beings. And of course the Pitar fathers gave their chaya I think it has a double H or double Y, I'm not sure which way, something like that. Chaya. For our physical body to be built upon, so we are divine human beings, that we have lost this divinity when our third eye closed becomes quite reasonable if we look into the theory. And she tells us in the secret doctrine that karma is indissolubly connected to the third eye, karma. So it is our actions, thoughts, and speech that we need to pay attention to. Buddhi, or intuition, without manas, or pure reason, is blind in man as well as in animal. And it is such a power that it can as easily kill as well as save. Buddhi is. This is our spiritual discrimination or wisdom. And it is a reactionary, in other words. It requires the pure reason to become responsible. And before we obtain these powers, which is the natural outcome of evolution, because we are cycling towards these realms, we need to understand what it is that it does, and that how it is used for the benefit of the all. She tells us that Buddhi can be used by the mind, which is manas, but also by kama. And we all know that kama is connected to the personality, lower mind, even though there's only one mind, and this is an aspect of that higher mind, its reflection, and our passions and desires. Oh, here we go again. It's not writing very well. I guess I'm not doing it good. We'll go to another color, give that one a rest. And manas is pure reason. So then, Buddhi itself, as we said, is reactionary. It's a power, but it's reactionary. The body is the irresponsible part, because it really is mayavic. It does not exist, but on this plane of existence, it exists. It's mayavic. So our principles, she tells us, really do not belong to the earth plane. When we think about where we have come, where we have obtained, or how we were given our principles, it stands to reason to this student's mind that I am a divine human being, even if I have forgotten that. I am not a karmic person. That's just my personality, as how I came into this objectivity. Without that, I could not exist. So the three combinations of those principles, manas, kama, and buddhi, gives us 6 combinations. 3 of them uses will action, and 3 of them uses psychic action, or kamic. So today's human being is mixed. It's a mixture of spiritual, intellectual, and psychic principles. None of them in the ascendant, because of our karma of the Atlantean days. With then psychic and kamic elements becoming in the ascendancy, the third eye was doomed to close or die, whichever way we want to express it. So today then, we express human nature as we experience it, but without knowing it. Human nature is what we express. And there is no progress in buddhi because it represents the perfected side of nature. It is perfected. It can be added to, but it cannot be improved upon because it's already perfect. And the other side is kama. So buddhi is preservative side of nature, and kama has neither intuition or reason in it. And so it represents the reproductive power in nature. It is the shadow. What is the shadow? This. It's the shadow. This is the shadow. It's the chaya of the secret doctrine. Yeah? Chaya. And there is no mixture of those two principles. Kama represents reproductive nature. Buddhi represents the perfected nature. The two of them cannot mix. One represents the spirituality or divinity, and the other one, the elemental beings of nature, material nature. So it cannot be mixed. How does this mixture come about? It is the creative will. Manas represents the creative will. This will. And it is that that enables the two to mix. It is the principle of progress in nature, and as we said, the reincarnating ego is pure manas. Manas in conjunction with buddhi moves us towards divinity. Manas in conjunction with kama moves us towards devilish personal deeds. And this is a statement that I'm reading verbatim. The great majority of the incarnating egos made their spirituality and all their divine attributes and powers the handmaidens of their newly awakened physiological and psychic passions instead of the reverse. Now this refers to the Atlantean era. The first race, we're told, were ethereal. The second, also ethereal, but they have beginning of a form. The third is the one that goes through a tremendous change. And you can read about it in the Secret Doctrine because there isn't really enough time to go over it. And it is during that period that our minds were lighted after its midpoint was reached. And she calls them, for clarity's purpose, Lemurians in the Secret Doctrine. The fourth race, when it comes on the scene, it is still spiritual. But once that we discover that the material world is also included in the whole universe, then our attention shifts to the material side of nature. And this is what we did. We caused ourselves tremendous heartache by doing that, but we are the Atlanteans, so we cannot escape the penalty. She says it was not a sin in the sense of karma to use these powers, but to make them subservient to our spirituality knowingly, because the third eye still functioned, was the greatest impediment to our progress today. And this is from St. Paul. He says, the whole creation groans in travail because of the iniquity of man, meaning the reincarnating ego. Because we are all about passion and desire and our feelings and emotions. We don't use reason correctly, and so this is how iniquity or injustice in the world takes place. Stagnation and death is the future of all that vegetates without change. So to bring about this change was the mission of that new movement in the 19th century. How can we change for the better, it is asked, if we don't first suffer? Because we cause these events to have their effect on us karmically. Now we're going to suffer, but if we suffer knowingly and accept our situation, then we can do something about it. We can bring about change. And it says in the Secret Doctrine that those of us who are shorn of the third eye, and I'm using her words, shorn, in other words, cut off from the third eye, manas, in conjunction with buddhi, fall victim to elusive allurements of the physical world. Elusive allurements of the physical world. Psychic. They seek, she tells us, to escape, as the elemental beings seek to escape, the pain and penalty of our karma, and call that emancipation, the religious world. Or they seek to acquire, as the elemental beings seek to acquire, that which seem to them good, and call that occultism, which none of it is a reliable statement. So, when HPB and Judge came on the scene, what did they do? Study, apply, promulgate the wisdom religions in all directions. Worked as the masters themselves must work to maintain in the body the union of buddhi to manas. So, union is what we need to achieve. These two principles. So, they created a change in the buddhi manas of the human race. Now, whether we call that self-organization, that effort, self-discipline, or self-sacrifice, this statement says it really does not have much meaning. The surpassing importance of unity should be based on true theosophical association, and that association is buddhi manas. Alike in the individual as in any collection of individual egos. The first step in universal brotherhood is individual and personal, because that change must first be brought about within ourselves, individually. So, it is the will to reform one's self, devotion to the best interests of others, which is called enlightened unselfishness. One single man, she tells us, can become a nucleus, a center, a seed of brotherhood, by his own will and effort. But no number of men can become a nucleus either by the surrender of their will to another or others, or by any cultivation or refinement of the psychic nature. The first lesson we have to learn that true chelaship is an attitude of the mind which is continuously maintained. Buddhi manas versus kama manas. So this is what we are here to change in ourselves first. Now, this is occult story series from Mr. Judge. And in this, even though it is a story, he truly is telling us the truth about the elemental world here. And I recommend that you read it. It is called The Skin of the Earth. And in it, he describes how the elementals work, how they are guided, and how they do their work. Guided by the unseen power, and the unseen power was present when he was invited to observe. So those inner worlds then open to us through this union of buddhi with manas. But his was not permanent at that time. He was just shown what was taking place. And it is a very long story, but it is a very important one. Because he says, guided by the unseen power and in their automatic obedience, because this is what the elemental world does. They obey to whatever vibratory rate they're attuned to. They only know how to do one thing, but they do it perfectly well all the time. They're guided, but they do it perfectly well. For to obey was their nature, he tells us. There were some who, by the greatness of their own momentum and the ferment of new forces attracted and gathering about them, seemed upon the point of bursting into some fuller expression, some higher state of intelligence and life, but they were withheld by something that was not the power guiding them. Looking closer, I saw that an antagonistic influence was at work in the place. The orbit of many of those docile and beautiful creatures included a passage to and fro the mystical wall. Their duties upon the earth as well as beneath its surface, faithful fulfillment of these functions, comprised an evolution into higher service and higher form. But he says others were paralyzed with the chill of contact. Others were so taxed to make up for the partial suspension of their fellows' activity that their work was unsteady and their orbital revolutions were checked. He's talking about the revolutions of the earth upon its own axis as well as around the sun. And he says that even though we do not see physically with these eyes, that these minute beings are the ones that do the work of retaining the integrity of the solar system in its place. So I'm showing you that the elemental world does have their place in life because they sustain us. They're in everything. They sustain us. But he says still the whole throng swung on like some splendid creation, paling, growing, throbbing, posing, a huge iridescent heart scintillating. So he's talking about the core of the earth. That core is internal and it sustains the earth's movement. It has a heart. That throbbing is a heart. Singing through the gloom. Here the mist was beaten back by greater efforts that jarred that harmony. I'm going to skip quite a bit and I come to this. The being who was showing the scene to Mr. Judge, and he's writing under the pen name of Kinnavan in this article. He was also shown the reason for it. He says, so I knew that upon whatever earth this happened, great changes would occur, and that in the path of the mist there would sweep over men epidemics of disease and crime. Horrified at such impending calamities, I sought for an answer and looked towards my guide. As I did so, he disappeared, and upon the wall his voice seemed to paint itself in living letters that themselves gave out a sound. It is the thoughts of men, in quotation marks, is what he printed on the wall. I hid my face, appalled at owning such a heritage. And when I looked again, great jets spurted through the skin of the earth, thoughts sprouting and pouring out in miasmic streams. So our thoughts, because we are pure manasa, have tremendous weight in shaping our world. You're looking at me like my time is up.
I would like to interject that that article is one of about 200. It's at www.theosophy.org by Mr. Judge.
You can do that at the end, actually. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Now, this is a very deep subject, and the secret doctrine is where we need to go. She gives a description of the Cyclopes, and she says we had one eye at the beginning. One eye, not two, not three. So the pineal gland of today, which is the remnant of that eye, was our spiritual eye, and it was open. And I read from the secret doctrine. There were four-armed human creatures in those early days of the male females. We were hermaphrodite in the third race, with one head and yet three eyes, which happened later. They could see before them and behind them. A kalpa later, when the separation had occurred, men having fallen into matter, their spiritual vision became dim, and coordinately the third eye commenced to lose its power. When the fourth race arrived at its middle age, the inner vision had to be awakened and acquired by artificial stimuli, which means that the third eye had already petrified. And so it soon then disappeared and went inside the cranial cavity, becoming part of the brain. She tells us, during the activity of the inner man, who is the inner man? We have an astral body, right? The electromagnetic, the one that provides the shape for the outer body. So the inner man, during trance and spiritual vision, during that period, the eye swells. This is the pineal gland, and expands. The arhat, she tells us, sees and feels it and regulates his action accordingly. So the third eye petrified during the Atlantean period, and our inner sight, hence, is blocked. So what do we use? We're either using this lower mind, passion, desires, which is in the ascendancy in most of us, or we move to this side and we use reason and try to reason things out with our intellectual mind, which is also the lower mind. But if it is having influence from the higher mind, it will eventually take over that function and guide the human being towards its divine aspects. And she tells us it is this combat, and it is a combat. At this stage in our development, it is a combat between the reasoning mind and this lower passions and desires business going in us that either pulls it down or up. And we're like a yo-yo, up and down, because we're a mixture of everything. We're either going up or we're going down. So what we need to do is, through meditation, stabilize this aspect of our lives, that we rely on the reasoning aspect of the mind and invite the divine mind to come in and assume its natural position in life. And she tells us this, it does take place by activating all of the spiritual centers in the mind, in the brain. And there we go. And there are conditions for it, and I'm simply going to read it. I have to tell what is the truth. She tells us, during human life, the greatest impediment in the way of spiritual development, and especially to the acquirement of yogi powers, is the activity of our physiological senses. And here we go. In the West, we lose the most energy through sexual activity and chitter-chatter. And here she explains, sexual action being closely connected by interaction with the spinal cord and the gray matter of the brain, it is useless to give any longer explanation. Of course, the normal and abnormal state of the brain and the degree of active work in the medulla oblongata reacts powerfully on the pineal gland, for owing to the number of centers in that region which controls by far the greater majority of the physiological actions of the animal economy. I'm reading. And also owing to the close and intimate neighborhood of the two, there must be exerted a very powerful inductive action by the medulla on the pineal gland. So this is the reason why celibacy is required of those who will move in that direction, meaning that you want to walk the path. And it will come to all of us, but not when we are not ready. When we are ready, this is the way it's going to be. That they want us to become independent, self-sufficient human beings who can do the work on their own and stay with the truth and not be pulled in different direction. This is why this stuff was brought out, to show us that this is our natural developmental stages that we're going through, but that in the coming ages, as we are now going to be on the same level with the first race, we're going to become spiritual. Now, if we do not progress and prepare ourselves, obviously we're not going to be able to do it, because after the midpoint, nature demands that this become a self-devised, self-induced effort. The impulse of nature will not anymore carry us forward. It has to be done by work by each individual human being. Now, I have a whole lot to say, but I will just going to stop here and open it for questions, and the rest of it perhaps we can express it in that period. Otherwise, it will not be sufficient time to go through it. I only covered the most important aspects of it, but there's a whole lot more.